Hello, everyone. Today we are honored, and I'm saying truly honored, to have an amazing personality. So, I want to introduce you all and I want to welcome Dr. Mukund Chorghade to our show where we discuss about education's future, the future of education. So, let me just tell you a little bit about Dr. Chorghade, a distinguished scientist, entrepreneur, a visionary leader in pharmaceutical research. With a career spanning decades, he has made groundbreaking contributions to medicinal chemistry and drug development. He's the founder and chief scientific officer of Chorghade Enterprises. His innovative work has transformed global pharmaceutical practices. He is also a respected academic serving as visiting faculty at many prestigious institutions such as Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, and the list just goes on. And where he shares his unparalleled expertise with the next generation of scientists. And today we hope that he can share his expertise and his knowledge and his perspective with us and enlighten us. So, welcome on our show, Dr. Chorghade.
Thank you very much, Amrutha. It's indeed a singular pleasure and an honor for me to be on this show, and more important, to be selected to be on this show, because I have a passion for education, for finding newer ways of communicating science to the next generation, as it were. And this is indeed a pleasure. So I don't have enough good things to say about it. So
thank you. We are really thrilled to, and I'm sure that everyone is going to be thrilled to watch this video because we are going to have some interesting perspectives. So, sir, please tell me, see, as a scientist, with your amazing academic experience and industrial experience, how do you envision the role of education and in this evolving world, especially which is dominated with AI and chat GPT? So how do you envision the role of education?
I am very favorably disposed towards education. Please remember, education is not rote memorization of things that are put in books. We are not reading Pothya Purana and not understanding it. In my opinion, what education teaches you, whether you are studying economics, physics, chemistry, or anything in languages and linguistics, what that education is teaching you is how to assemble and assimilate a disparate body of facts. Then what it teaches you is to how to do problem solving. How do you use all these facts to delve deeper into the literature, whether it's in arts or sciences, and then apply what makes us human beings particularly proficient, and that is using our brain power and to solve problems. So education is not just a teacher coming and reciting facts and the students regurgitating them. Everything has to be geared towards critical thinking, and this is something that is of extreme importance. Now, you did mention AI, you did mention chat GPT. These are absolutely magnificent tools to have, but please remember, they are not a substitute for your or anybody else's creativity. I cannot invent a new transistor. I cannot invent a new catalyst. I cannot write a Ramayana or Mahabharat simply through chat GPT. You have to apply your human intelligence, your innate intelligence, and even your creativity into really thinking about making things better for the world. There is one thing we humans can do, and this is what education is going to teach us, and that is very simply, we are looking at what is there in the universe. There are many people looking at it, but it requires your brain to say, how can I make it better? How can I make things? This is something that chat GPT is not going to give you anything. The old scientific wisdom is, Thousands of people saw apples fall from trees. Okay. It required the brains of an Isaac Newton to correlate it with gravity. And this is
Correct.
what I always encourage my students to do. Harness your brain power, have your scientific creativity.
Absolutely. So, how can then the education systems foster these qualities? It could be creativity, it could be curiosity, it could be even adaptability. To and how do we prepare our students, for this ever fast changing, rapidly changing world?
So we even in the USA and certainly in India are devoting a lot of attention to this. What is going to be the curriculum of the future? And
Correct.
remember, curricula have evolved over the centuries. I mean, in
Yes.
the days of our Gurukuls and all that, Vyas and all the Maharshis used to impart you a certain knowledge of mantras and all that. Now, today, you need to be inventors yourself. Okay. And how do
Right.
you sponsor scientific creativity and curiosity? So, first of all, we should get rid of this rote memorization. We should not be judged simply because a teacher comes in and tells you about fixation of nitrogen. Then the first question in an exam is write about fixation of nitrogen. That is not channeling any creativity. I would encourage people to get into research and creative thinking early. What is happening in the United States today? Even the Harvards and MITs and Caltechs, they are stimulating this thinking by getting everybody who enters into a lab. Now this can be a language lab, this can be a chemistry lab, or everything else. And it is
Right.
now that this thing is trickling down even to the high schools. So
Right.
let me give you one example. We started what is called as the Nobel Scholars Program.
Wow.
And that was where some Nobel laureates gave lectures to the normally disadvantaged sections of society.
Oh,
We extend this program to India. Today, last year I had 62 students participate in this.
amazing.
Every one of these students was between the ages of 7 to 15. Okay, they started getting involved in robotics. Finally, the University of Illinois had Zoom lectures for these kids. Now remember, again, they are in rural areas. The Zoom
Yeah.
lectures were held in India from 10 p.m. to 11:30, normally past the bedtime. Our
Yeah.
dropout rate was nothing. And these
Wow.
students did robotics and all that. And then Sir Richard Roberts, the Nobel laureate, he came to Pune. We invited all these kids to meet him. And he
Wow.
said, all the adults are not welcome in the room. I want to have a one-on-one dialogue with these kids. And he
Absolutely.
spoke for 1.5 hours with these kids in the grounds of SP College. They were thrilled. Now they are all excited. But this is the kind of creativity that I want to think. And if you will
Right.
permit me, I'll give you a brilliant
Please.
example of how creative thinking happened. So in Harvard, there was a professor called Edwin J. Gould. Okay, he took his students in his class on an expedition to Latin America, in South America, and then he found out that there was an insect that was embedded in a material medium called amber. Then they did the dating and all that of this insect. They found out that the DNA is at least 2 million years old. Now,
Okay.
what was his assignment to his kids? He didn't ask them to memorize, oh, DNA ka sequence kya hai. He asked them to come up with a creative idea of how they will use this for the future. One of his students was a 18 or 19-year-old person called Carrie Mullis. He proposed an idea that we have now isolated the DNA, but how do we polymerize it? How do we make copies of it? And then what can we do? About few
Right.
years later, this gentleman got the Nobel Prize for discovering what is called as the PCR reaction. His
Oh,
classmate was somebody who was different. He was an English language major, and he
oh,
proposed that why don't we replicate this DNA and so on, and even make dinosaurs. Who do you think this person was? He was J. Michael Crichton. who was the
Oh,
writer of Jurassic
right.
Park. Now, both of these students were taught by Professor Gould. They were taught to exercise their creative thinking. And
Yes.
this is what I
Wow.
cherish, what I
This
admire.
this is the best example. Like I mean, raising, creating that curiosity, and the thing we say, ki enlighten that spark. Just you have to do that to the kids, and then the kids will come up. And this is like the best example.
Absolutely. And one
Like,
very important thing, see, in the old system, even when I was brought up under, you were trained to have unquestioning obedience to your teacher. The teacher
yeah,
would say, I'm saying this one, so you should do it. All these examples that I'm giving you, the teacher said, don't just follow me blindly. Use your creative thinking. And the other example that is memorable to me is that of Professor Brian Josephson, who was a PhD student in Cambridge University, England. Every PhD student is required to come up with an original research proposal and then defend it. On this gentleman's committee, there were three Nobel Prize winners in physics, and they were working at the famous Cavendish labs, which I've had the
wow,
pleasure of visiting. Now,
amazing.
these people said, your proposal is so off the wall and off the charts. In 10 years, we predict either you will drop out of physics because your ideas don't work, or you will get a Nobel Prize. Brian Josephson made it happen. He discovered and formulated all the NP junctions. He did get the Nobel Prize in physics, and I met him just last summer.
My
So
God.
this is how people can stimulate, create. One of the worst things I can do as a teacher is to berate some student. He may have
Yeah,
made a mistake, he or she, but I cannot. Arey, you are stupid. You will never learn. That is absolutely the wrong way of doing things. Because
right.
there is an element of goodness in everybody, and it is up to me as a teacher to stimulate that.
To stimulate. Absolutely, absolutely. So
By
we
the
are
way, if you
saying
ever feel my answers are too long-winded, just
no,
stop
no,
me.
no, no, not at all, not at all. It's very interesting. Every word that you're saying is enlightening, and it's kind of sparking that thought process. And I hope that everyone's thought process is again started with this kind of conversation. So, like you said, that stimulating creativity or stimulating uh, the kids is the teacher's job. And today, many Ivy Leagues are also advocating for interdisciplinary learning. So, in schools and everyone is today talking about, even in India, is talking about holistic models, holistic education, interdisciplinary learning. But are we truly doing it? Is a big question mark. So I would want to really understand the meaning of how to implement such things, because all these things look very beautiful on paper. I've heard these things. How do we implement it?
You implement it the way it is being considered over here. So even 20 years ago, I could become a chemistry major with minor or subsidiary, as they would call it, in say physics. So I would
Okay.
take a lot of courses in that direction. So what is interdisciplinary one now? Today's students, for example, at University of Illinois, Harvard, they are mandated to take one extra course in engineering, one course in entrepreneurship, one course in soft skills and how you
Mm-hmm.
project your enthusiasm. And this
Mm-hmm.
thing is called as the blended degrees. Now they are in their infancy, they are actually called the blend. Now, these chemistry major students and all that also have to take a course in English literature. They
Okay.
study Shakespeare, they study other things, because what that is teaching you is how to write properly and
Yes.
learn from the masters, as it were. I mean, there are many famous writers here who have got a Nobel Prize in their own right, but you learn how to write. And it is so important, believe it or not, if I'm writing a grant proposal to the National Institutes of Health here, I need to have a good knowledge of the syntax, the grammar. And too many of the young people of today, who I humbly believe have been led astray by social media and all that, they literally do not know how to write. I mean, if I see a term paper
Yeah.
written in all those short forms, LOL and this and that doesn't create an impression of
Yeah.
professionalism. It's good to
Right.
communicate, but people have to write. The writing
Yes.
has to be very crisp, and you can only learn that by taking a serious course in English writing, learn all the soft skills and so on.
Right.
Interdisciplinary also connects the chemists with the molecular biologists, with the engineers,
Right.
and so on. And today there are many programs in place. One of the rare universities in India which has started this blended BS is
Mm-hmm.
Pune University, actually.
Right.
And I've had the
Wow.
pleasure of meeting some people. Mumbai still doesn't have it, but I think this is going to be a sign of the future
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
should be the sign of the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, may I quickly make one more point in addition to what I made? That
Yes.
is, we as students who are now charged with doing critical thinking, we have to treat all the subjects with equal respect, incorporate some of that thinking into our daily work.
Right.
I cannot simply say, oh, those English majors are all not very effective people. That's not the case. Teach them
Right.
also some of your science. You learn some of the better ways of communication and so on. And the biggest advice I would give to the students, don't just go with the fads.
Ah.
It's not enough to say, oh, even when I was a college kid, people used to ask, is there any scope for this field? That's a wrong question. Scope is what
Ah.
you make of it. There have been many people who have
True.
invented things and so on and so forth. And it is not just enough to blindly follow something.
It's so true. And like you said, like even if it's a language, especially because most of the times, I mean, it's a common norm in India, at least with most of the kids who are especially the PCB kind of, or the PCM kind of lot, always end up not showing much interest in languages, especially because A, oh, it's not scoring. B, what will I do with it? I mean, I can speak English. Why do I need it? I mean, why do I have to learn it? Forget English, even any language, or it could be your mother tongue. It could be any language. So, I truly appreciate what you said and completely understand and respect that.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, today we have a lot of online learning that is happening through various portals. There is edX, there is Coursera, and you have all these big universities and Ivy Leagues also having their courses on edX, and then we also have these online schools these days, and then we have homeschooling, and then there is also a rise of self-directed learning. So are we reimagining formal education? I mean, the one that is happening in classrooms. How good is it, and how much value can it bring to table? I mean,
I will give you a mixed answer to that question. So I
okay.
believe in the value of all this. I have phenomenally learned quite a few things from these platforms. I was there at the inception when Harvard University and MIT they
Uh-huh.
paired up to do this edX platform. The very
Right.
idea was for making education equally accessible to people who cannot travel to Boston, who cannot come in person. And people should never be deprived of an opportunity
Yes.
to learn something with the advent of computers and all that. And of course, Zoom and other meets, that is also a learning process. I've given several lectures by Zoom. People have benefited from it. People have
Right.
learned something from it. I hope at least. I have learned some things from many of the meetings that I have attended and some courses that I have taken. We are actively encouraging that. So, what is the slight negative I might
Mhm.
add? Harvard, MIT, and all have made it very clear that those courses do not count for a formal degree.
Right.
Okay. So, therefore, you cannot call yourself an alumnus of Harvard or MIT. in the job
Correct.
market. You can always say that you have taken these classes and everything else. But for me, the biggest thing in a formal classroom experience, I get to meet the teachers who are regularly teaching me in a manner I cannot meet in a virtual platform. I have
Hmm.
personally benefited
Hmm.
from some amazing teachers, which is by following program I have been benefited by working in the labs of several Nobel laureates. I have got that kind of insight, that kind of training simply by a virtual platform. So again, let's blend in the two. Nobody should be ever deprived of an education. They should
Hmm.
avail of every available opportunity, but they should not share classes. And this is
Right.
what I really want to emphasize. If there is a good teacher who is well known,
Yeah.
they should make
Right.
every attempt to attend the classes, because that kind of mentorship means a lot and will
Yes.
progress your career quite a
Yes.
lot.
Right. Right. And online courses definitely. I mean, especially during COVID, we all saw that online you can do so many things, and so many things can be achieved and completed with online learning. And these edX courses, I remember. I mean, I would like to share with you. My son, I remember, he was interested in dinosaurs, and we had done like a short course he did from edX, and it was by Hong Kong University. So there was no age limit, and there was something that, I mean, if he really likes dinosaurs, he wouldn't be allowed in a paleontology course, but just because it's online, he can gather some more information. And like you said, obviously he will not have
Absolutely.
that certificate, but that certificate is more like understanding, and that thirst for your knowledge can be quenched.
I completely agree with you. No ifs, ands, and buts
Yeah.
about it. So people should avail themselves of every opportunity that they can get. These
Yeah.
Zoom and other, we now have a very organized system of teaching by Zoom and running
Wow.
entire courses. I'm doing that all the time.
Lovely.
And out of every 10 people, even if half benefit, I
Right.
humbly believe that that's a great source of
Yes.
satisfaction for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you also mentioned about mentorship,
Yes.
so and you have been a visiting faculty with many institutions, and so how important is mentorship? Especially, you also mentioned, like, teaching cannot only be like do this and don't do that, and it should be more to do with stimulating. You also mentioned about mentorship. So how do we really implement that? Again, I'm coming to that, so that we also understand and we get better at it.
So mentorship is most effective. Teaching can be done to many people, but mentorship is more a one-on-one relationship between a
Mm-hmm.
mentor who is typically a more experienced person and the person who is less experienced, who can be called as the protege. I believe a lot in the
Mm-hmm.
mentorship process. I'm myself mentoring quite a few people. These are PhD students, young faculty, and all. But the idea of mentorship is the mentor identifies the strengths in the person they are mentoring and provides some advice on how they can boost those strengths. Mentorship is never about criticizing somebody for their perceived weaknesses. You can point out that this you haven't done so well, and it will behoove of you to do these things better in this way. And that mentorship is extraordinarily valuable. In looking at me, I'm a product of very effective mentorship by some of the people I've already
Wow.
mentioned. Rich
Yes.
Roberts, I did a sabbatical with him. I'm still affiliated with him. But every time I have a 1 hour conversation with me, he shed some new insights into the process. My other advisor is Professor David Dolphin, who is now Sir David Dolphin. He is a Canadian. I was sent to his laboratory to soak up some particular skills in porphyrin chemistry. And Professor Dolphin taught me a lot. He taught me how to apply those ideas, and then I extended
Okay.
them. So, the long and
Wow.
short of it, that catalyst is now known as the Chorghade Dolphin catalyst, and it has achieved very good recognition. But I believe in that kind of stuff. The mentor has a unique role to play because, look, if I'm
Indeed.
sitting at my chair, all my ideas look very good to me. But there has to be
Absolutely.
somebody who is a good sounding board, not necessarily a shoulder to cry on, but somebody who you can rely on to
Correct.
provide you very valuable advice about how you can develop your own career, how you can develop your communication skills. And that is something phenomenally important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, if you were tasked with redesigning the global education system or probably the Indian education system, what would your top priorities to prepare the next generation would be?
My top priority, to be very honest with you, is to redefine or make strategic changes in the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I speak with some authority on chemistry, for example, and to a certain lesser extent about physics.
Okay.
Molecular biology has not yet become an integral part of the Indian curriculum. First
Mm-hmm.
change I would make is get people into the lab early, make them do some research and some creative thinking. These kids have the brains. Let's make no mistakes about that one. It requires the teacher to stimulate those particular brains and to give them experiments which they can realistically have. Let me give you a perfect example about a typical chemistry curriculum.
Okay.
We are now teaching them reactions which
Mm-hmm.
were invented in the 1904 to 1918 time frame.
Correct.
Most of these reactions are obsolete. Okay, nobody has used them in industry for the last 70, 80 years. There's a
Okay.
reverse corollary to that one. Most of the reactions that were invented even by Nobel laureates since 1970 have never been used by Indian industry. So
Oh,
most people are not getting the education that is required for industry. So revamp the curriculum. Let's start with some chemistry, some physics. In one lecture instead of devoting 5 to them. Okay. And then
correct.
proceed forward. Have at least 3 months on all the modern chemistry because people are
Right.
not learning that. And when people come to work in industry, they have no idea what the Grubbs olefin metathesis reaction is or what is a chemosynthetic lever which I have
Yeah.
invented. But these are all
Oh,
things that people have to take and they have to adapt to the modern times.
correct.
You go to any science lab, people are still using the old galvanometers and all that, but there is so much more to modern physics, which we are
Correct.
not teaching. But above
Yeah.
all, please tie it in with very creative thinking. And there are some
Correct.
things now which should be phased out. I mean, Pune University, for example, told me that at least 800 people have got PhDs on Jnaneshwari. Now tell
Oh,
me what new things they have brought to the table by way of research.
right. Right.
So
So,
you have to get more modern in the thinking. Think about modern writing, what you can do.
so
Some of our saints and other people will remain glorious people. I will
absolutely.
treasure
Absolutely.
them.
Absolutely. So, stimulating is important, but at the same time, bridging the gap, like when you're creating a product, are we preparing that product for the market? I mean, when that product enters the industry, is he or she ready or understands? So, today, it is not. I mean, they are not ready. They are not understanding what is happening in the market. So
Exactly.
bridging this gap is extremely important, right?
One thing they're trying now in the USA is that
Mm-hmm.
many of these kids will do an industrial internship. They will
Uh-huh.
just
Correct.
walk around the
Correct.
lab. They will see what life is like. And
Yeah.
that adds tremendous material value.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
When I was on a sabbatical visit in Cambridge, England,
Okay.
my son and of course my wife were visiting me. And Professor Stephen Lay said, he looked at my son, he was 14 years old, and he said, hey, instead of just walking around in Cambridge and
Yeah.
why don't you putter around in the lab? So he offered him an opportunity of spending 3 weeks in the lab in Cambridge, England.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
this was followed up by Bob Grubbs at Caltech. My son was
Mm-hmm.
hooked on to chemistry, and he's
Yeah.
he's a practicing chemist now.
Yes.
But think of what he had learned.
Correct. Correct. The right amount of stimulation, the exposure. So, what are your ending thoughts, and one or a couple of messages for parents and teachers that you would like to uh, give?
Messages for both parents and teachers is respect the innate ability and creativity of your student or child or anything else.
Right.
Do not discourage them into trying out new things. Too
Correct.
often the kid says, I may try out this one, and people say no. When I was a boy, the threat always was that if you don't study hard, we'll have to open up a bicycle shop for you, or a hair cutting salon. I don't think those threats are particularly effective.
Yeah.
Always aim to stimulate the creative thinking of these people, even though it may be a bit different from your own.
Correct.
Sit them down. Say, why are you thinking this way? I'm not saying that we should not make any attempt to discipline if the kid is obviously
Yeah.
straying
Yeah.
away
Yeah.
and just then we have to exert some suitable corrective influence,
Right.
but never ridicule people's ideas and all that, because ingrained in many of them are very good thoughts which has
Correct.
been very much demonstrated.
Right.
My advice to the teachers who particularly teach in a classroom setting
Mm-hmm.
is always make it more interactive, please. You
Yes.
are not there just to throw out facts at them. A plus B is equal to C. That is a fact. But now, give people some problems. How will you use this in real
Problem.
life? Make your classroom experience fun. People
Yes.
shouldn't be sleeping in your classroom. And this is something very, very important. When you are going there as a teacher, you are representing that particular subject, you are representing that field.
Yes.
And this is something very, very important for even kids to know. Well, kids also have to respect their teachers and their parents, and they have to engage in a very respectful dialogue about what they can do. Now, today, the kids of today have access to more information
Yeah.
than any of us, Amrutha, you and I have ever had,
True.
and make make the best use of it instead of just not disregarding it. So
Absolutely.
use all the tools, but think very creatively and think of how I can contribute to the field. If you have a new idea, bounce it off your mentor, your advisor, your anybody. Out of 10 ideas, even if one works, you got it made.
Right. Right.
And by the way, if
Absolutely.
ever you need any help, you and any of people from me, I am always there behind to back you up.
Wow. You all heard
So
it.
let's have no misunderstandings about that.
Amazing. Amazing. Wow. Thank you so much. And, you know, I think what we learned today from all your thoughts is stimulation, creative thinking, bridging the gap, giving relevant knowledge, relevant education, which will make the kids industry ready, the exposure, and respecting the kind of exposure that we are getting today, and not disregarding it. And yeah, so thank you so much for such enlightening, wonderful conversation, sir.